They came to me because a group of inmates couldn't get a public defender's office to care about their money problem. 6 days later, the prison's death list stopped looking random and started looking scheduled. That was how I ended up meeting the lawyer they'd managed to get on the outside. The outside attorney showed up to my office with a grocery bag that had been used too many times. She kept it on her lap until I cleared a space on my desk. "I'm not giving you names," she said. "Not yet." "I'm getting cash, though," I said. She slid the bag over. Inside was $8,000 in 1s, 5s, and 10s, folded flat and packed tight. It smelled of stale tobacco and that dry paper odor you get from storage rooms. "Commissary," she said. "Pooled." I didn't touch it right away. I sat back and read the retainer agreement again. The same 3 pages. Nothing new appeared the second time. I still read it. "Client is collective," I said. "A group, represented by someone inside." "Inmate lawyer?" I said. She didn't confirm it. She just tapped the scope line. Suspicious deaths, conditions complaints, retaliation. I'd worked domestic money cases for years, inheritance fights, family business skimming, betrayal that shows up as numbers. This one was different. Inmates hiring a private investigator wasn't normal. Cash that dirty and that small was also an audit risk. "Why me?" I said, instead of an advocacy group. "They tried," she said. "They get letters. They get condolences. No action." I took the bag and put it in my bottom drawer. I logged the amount and denominations because if I didn't, I'd up defending myself later. I hesitated before I signed. That pause wasn't dramatic. It was me doing the math on trouble. Then I signed anyway. On her way out, she added, "They'll want updates in writing. No phone calls." "Through you," I said. "Through me," she agreed. Her tone stayed calm, but her hands didn't stop moving until she was out the door. I sat with the cash smell in my office and tried to picture why felons would trust a private eye more than the system that assigned them counsel. I didn't land on an answer. I opened a fresh case notebook and wrote one line: "Deaths inside."
Money outside. The first packet the outside attorney delivered was thin. A list of names and dates. Copies of death notifications mailed to families, a few facility incident summaries stamped final. I spent the afternoon verifying the dead list against public records and anything I could legally request without a subpoena. Obituaries matched, the prison press releases matched, the official causes of death were all over the place. Heart attack, suicide, fight, unknown medical event. That's how it was supposed to look if somebody wanted it to look natural. The inmate lawyer, still anonymous to me at that point, had included one extra sheet, a grid with columns and handwritten labels. Name, housing unit, Form 19C date, death date, days between. Every row said 14. 14 days between filing a Form 19C complaint and dying. I didn't believe it at first. Patterns in a small set can be a trick. I built my own spreadsheet from scratch. I entered the names, then confirmed the complaint filings through what the outside attorney could get from families and a couple of former inmates who'd kept copies of their own paperwork. It took hours of calls that went nowhere. Then one call went somewhere.
A former inmate, voice clipped and careful, said, "Those forms get copied. You keep yours. It's the only proof you tried." He emailed me 2 blurry photos of a Form 19C. The date stamp matched the grid. I cross-referenced 4 victims, then 6. It held. 14 days could be processing time. 14 days could be a warning period. I wrote both in my notebook and didn't circle either one. The next morning, I drove to the first victim's family home on the list, a suburb where the mailboxes match and the porch lights are always on. The mother answered. She had the posture of someone who'd repeated the same story until it turned into a script. He had a bad heart, she told me, not angry, not defensive. They said he collapsed. He was using again, probably. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to check the timeline. She let me in what kept the chain on the door until she recognized the outside attorney's letterhead on my business card. That detail mattered. She brought out the death notification, single page, facility letterhead, signature block filled in with a stamped name. No doctor listed.
It said no autopsy performed. It said the body was released to a contracted funeral home. "Did anyone from the prison call you?" I asked. "Yes," she said, then stopped. "No, not a call. A message. Somebody left a message. Do you have it?" I said. She went to a kitchen drawer and came back with her phone, not offering it, just holding it. "I don't keep voicemails." "Then it's gone," I said. Her shoulders loosened a fraction. Relief, not agreement. Then she said, "He mailed me a letter." That didn't fit the collapsed suddenly version. She brought it from a shoebox. The envelope was postmarked the day the prison said he died. The letter inside was short, written in careful block letters. "Ma, I'm good. I'm not sick. Don't believe them if something happens. I filed the form. I had to. Love." I asked where she got the "bad heart" line from. She hesitated, then said, "They told me when I called." "Who?" I asked. "A guard. He wouldn't give his name," she said.
He said I shouldn't make trouble. That was the first time in the case a person said, "make trouble." People say it when they've been trained to fear paperwork. I copied the letter, front and back. I photographed the postmark and the return address. I asked for any funeral paperwork. The funeral home invoice showed the body was delivered to them at 3:42 a.m. The death notification listed time of death as 11:18 p.m. the night before. That gap was real time. The next family's story was similar, but the details changed. In their version, it was suicide. The sister said the prison told her he was depressed. Then she said he'd been upbeat on the last call and asked her to send more stamped envelopes. Then she caught herself and stopped talking. I didn't fill the silence for her. I asked for the last call record. She didn't have it. The prison's call service wasn't going to hand it to me. I wrote down her memory. 2 Mondays ago, after dinner. I drove back to my office and sat in my car for a full minute with the engine off, hands on the wheel, not moving. I didn't have enough to act on yet. I had grief, stamps, and a pattern somebody could still argue into coincidence. I'm not proud of what I thought next, and it didn't lead me anywhere useful. I caught myself assuming the families were unreliable because they wanted their dead to be innocent. That was lazy. They were the only ones giving me anything that wasn't stamped final. 3 days in, I requested a formal visit to the prison under the pretext of reviewing conditions complaints connected to potential civil action. The outside attorney's letter did the heavy lifting. The prison couldn't deny every request without making the denial itself a story. The facility processed me the way they process everyone. Metal detector, clipboard, plastic chair. Guards didn't need to speak to control the room. The warden met me in an administrative office that looked imported from a corporate building. Pristine suit, expensive watch, no dust on anything.
"You're working for inmates," he said, not asking. "I'm working for an attorney. They have concerns about retaliatory deaths." He leaned back. "Deaths happen. Violence happens. People with conditions come in here. I'm looking for the common factor," I said.
"There isn't one," he said quickly. It wasn't what he said. It was how fast he said it. I placed the grid on his desk. I didn't slide it to him. He didn't look. "You're saying these men died 2 weeks after filing?" I said. "Different causes, same interval." "Correlation is not causation," he said. It sounded practiced. I asked for visitor logs for the days in question. He refused. I asked for shift assignment rosters. He refused again, then offered a sanitized printout. "Staffing levels by unit, no names. We run a tight ship," he said. "Order above all." That phrase was his. He didn't say it proudly, but he didn't hide it. I didn't have authority inside those walls. I did have access to one thing the warden couldn't fully control: the visitor log in the lobby, where civilians sign in and out. I asked the front desk to confirm my sign-in time for my own notes. The clerk turned the book toward me. On the days of multiple deaths listed, the shift commander's name appeared as a required notation beside the incident entries. Same name, over and over. Captain Miller.
I wrote it down with the date and page number. The clerk watched my pen, then reached over and rotated the log back toward herself. On my way out, a silent guard at the sally port slowed my release by a few seconds. Not enough to complain about, enough to let me know I was being measured. He leaned forward a fraction. "You won't get rosters, you'll get bodies." He slid his hand across the table. Under his palm were tiny scrolls of toilet paper, rolled tight and flattened. He didn't pass them directly. He just let them sit where I could pick them up without it looking like a handoff. Each scroll had dates and times and what looked like a code, letters and numbers, repeated sequences. Next to each was a set of initials that could have been guard names or unit codes. "This is what you've got," I said quietly. "This is what I can keep. Paper disappears, people disappear." I started to unroll one. He put 2 fingers on it. "Don't open them here," he said. "You want a report, not a spectacle." "Captain Miller," I said. "Your notes include him?" His jaw tightened.
"He runs the floor on nights. He chooses who gets moved. He chooses which camera is down." "How do you know?" I asked. His patience ran out, and he didn't hide it. "Because I'm alive," he said, "and because I don't file complaints, I document them." I was wrong about what I could push for in that room. I thought I could get him to give me a name, one clean identifier, something I could verify without guessing. I didn't. I sat there with the guard close and the bolted table between us, and I let the gap hang. "Why haven't they killed you?" I said. He didn't answer right away. That silence was its own answer. Then he said, "They think I'm useful. For now." Before the guard could drift closer, he tapped the tabletop twice. "You'll get one chance to do this right. If you go loud too early, they'll clean house." I pocketed the scrolls without them. My decision was simple. Treat them as intelligence lead, not as evidence until I could authenticate. Outside the prison, I wrote down the meeting's start and time from the visitor receipt. I wrote down which guard supervised.
I wrote down that the inmate lawyer's hands shook once when he slid the paper. By day 5, I had enough to build the case the way I build any case. Make it boring, make it time-stamped, and make it hard to argue with. I digitized the grid. I added supporting documents, the family's letters, postmarks, funeral home delivery times, and the few Form 19C copies I could get. I added the prison's own public statements. I created a timeline for each victim. Complaint filed, date stamped, death notification generated, body delivered. Then I started decoding the toilet paper logs. The code wasn't complex, it was cautious. Letters matched housing units. Numbers matched camera IDs. The same 2 camera IDs showed down during each death window. A repeated set of initials matched a guard name I'd seen on a staff directory posted on a public procurement page. First initial, last name. Not proof by itself. Enough to map. I thought the prison was the only place I needed to watch. That assumption lasted until the first outside escalation hit. 2 days after my visit, one of the mothers called me from a number I didn't recognize.
Her voice was smaller than it had been in her kitchen. She said, "Someone came by," she said. "Who?" I asked. "Man in a windbreaker," she said. "He said internal affairs." "Did he show ID?" I asked. "He flashed something," she said. "Too quick." "What did he want?" I asked. "He wanted the letter," she said. "The one my son mailed." I kept my voice even. "Did you give it to him?" "No," she said. "I said I didn't have it." She paused. "He said I could be charged for withholding evidence." That wasn't a normal move. If it was a real investigator, there would be a card, a case number, a formal request. This was pressure. It meant somebody inside the prison knew I'd been talking to families, and they were trying to vacuum up paper. I told her, "Don't speak to him again. If he comes back, ask for a card through the door." Then I stopped. I didn't tell her to call me back with details. I didn't tell her to call the prison. I sat with the fact that my case had moved from dead men to living families. That was the part I hadn't priced into $8,000 in small bills. That afternoon, I made 2 calls. First, to the funeral home on the invoice. I didn't ask for opinions. I asked for their intake logs for the night they received the body. The manager didn't want to get involved. "We do removals. We don't do politics." "I'm not asking for politics," I said. "I'm asking for your own timestamp." He gave me a narrow slice, a screenshot of their intake entry. 3:42 a.m. matched the invoice. Driver initials were listed. So was a vehicle number from a contracted transport service. Second call to the transport service listed on the invoice. The dispatcher gave me the run sheet number and hung up when I asked who signed the release at the facility. That was fine. A run sheet number still ties the chain. I wrote it down. Then I reread the same 2 pages of my case notebook I'd already filled. No new meaning appeared. I still read them. That habit wasn't helping, but I couldn't stop it. I went back to the prison for an administrative follow-up and watched the guard shift change from a public corridor. I didn't need to get inside the secure units to see how the guards interacted. Most didn't speak much. One junior guard kept his chin down and moved fast. He didn't drift toward the group. He didn't joke. He looked scared in the way people do when they want a paycheck but don't want to be part of what buys it. After I left, I waited in the parking lot and watched staff exit. No tailing, no tricks. Just seeing who didn't go home clean. The junior guard walked to a dented car and sat without starting it. 10 seconds, 20. He looked at his phone, then put it face down. He stayed still. I approached, kept distance, and showed my card through the open window space. "I'm not here to jam you up," I said. He shook his head once. "I can't." "You can," I said. "You won't." He started to say something, then stopped. "They told us not to talk." "Who?" I asked. He gripped the steering wheel. "You know who. I know the warden refuses records. I know Captain Miller works every death night.
His breathing changed. The name landed.
"I didn't say that," he said fast. "I did," I replied. "You're the one sitting here not driving." He swallowed, then reached down and cracked his glove box. He didn't pull anything out. He just let me see paper edges. "It's nothing," he said. "It's something," I said. He stared straight ahead. "I wrote something up," he said. "To who?" I asked. He hesitated long enough that I thought he'd shut down. Then he said, "HR, a resignation." "Why?" I asked. His jaw worked. "Because I can't do this." "Let me see it," I said. He shook his head hard. "If you have it, they'll search me." I backed off. "Then don't keep it in your car," I said. "Not here." That advice cost me later. At the time, it was the only thing I could offer without making him bolt or making him a target. He drove out. I stood in that parking lot longer than I needed to, empty-handed. I went to the trash bins outside the staff building because that's where paper goes when people panic. I wore gloves. The smell stays with you.
In the top layer, I found torn pieces of a letter, printed, not handwritten. The header was the prison's HR formatting. Most of the body was shredded by hand. One phrase survived: moral objections. Another line was blacked out with thick marker, then torn through. A name was missing. I photographed it, bagged it, and wrote the time. It wasn't enough for court. It was enough to show fear, not loyalty, kept the silence in place. That night, when I returned to my office, my desk drawer was slightly open. I keep it closed. The cash bag was still there. My case notebook was in the same spot. Nothing obvious stolen. I checked my file cabinet. One folder was out of alignment by a half-inch. I couldn't prove anyone had been inside. The feeling stayed anyway. I made copies of everything and stored them off-site. After that, I stopped keeping the only version of anything in my office. The next morning, I met the outside attorney at her office. I brought a USB drive with the digitized logs, the correlation spreadsheet, and the family documents scanned. I also brought a printed index with page numbers and source notes.
A drive without a map is how people pretend they didn't understand. She locked her door after I entered. She looked tired, she said. I slept, just not well. She plugged the USB into a laptop that wasn't connected to the internet. She clicked through the folders without speaking. "You have enough to force subpoenas," she said. "And enough to get someone killed inside if we tip our hand," she said. "We'll do this in the right order," she said. "Civil filing, then protective orders, then referrals." I watched her copy the drive to 2 separate encrypted devices. When she finished, she slid one into a safe and left the other on her desk. "You're done," she said, meaning my assignment, meaning I'd earned my fee. I didn't feel done. I felt exposed. As I stood, she said, "There's one more envelope. It's for you, from inside." I expected a bonus payment, another bag of small bills. Instead, the envelope was thin and stiff, and my address was typed, not written. Back in my office, I waited to open it. I made coffee I didn't drink.
I stared at the case file without it, then opened it and stared at the same pages again. Nothing new appeared. My hands still didn't move. When I finally tore the envelope, a photocopy slid out. Case file 04112. My own header template. My own format. My own signature on the dismissal form. Dated 12 years ago. The subject line: assault allegation, employee involved. The suspect: Miller, junior officer. I sat there and let the paper rest on the desk.
The worst part wasn't the memory. It was the blank space where the memory should have been. I remembered the case generally. Young guard accused, inmate bruised, no cooperating witnesses, internal review closed. I'd chalked it up as unprovable. The photocopy didn't stop at the dismissal. It included an attachment I didn't remember, a complaint memo noting prior incident rumor, and a note that surveillance footage for the time window was unavailable due to system maintenance. It was the same kind of down camera the inmate lawyer had coated in toilet paper. My stomach tightened.
I wrote one line in my notebook and didn't underline it. I didn't dig. There was a second sheet in the envelope, not photocopied, handwritten in careful block print. You were the first we hired to look at himself. I read it twice. I didn't get smarter the second time. I just got colder. For 3 days, I'd been fully committed to the theory that the current killings were a new system, new leadership, new brutality, a warden drifting into corruption. I'd said, out loud, in the warden's office, that I was looking for the common factor now. The common factor had been there 12 years ago, and I'd been the one who let it slide into lack of evidence. I sat back and tried to replay my old decision-making. I told myself I'd been overloaded. I told myself I'd been underpaid. I told myself it was a different time. None of those explanations changed the ink on my signature. A specific self-critical thought landed and just sat there. I'd always liked cases that ended clean, because clean endings made me feel competent. That preference had shaped what I called unprovable. It didn't lead to a decision. It just sat in my office with me, alongside the smell of commissary cash. The outside attorney called once. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying the filing was moving forward and that the press would be involved once the first subpoenas hit. Procedural. Calm. I didn't call the inmate lawyer. I didn't have a line to him. That was the point. I pulled my old archive box from the back of the cabinet and found the original file for number 04112. It was there. My retention system worked, even when I didn't. Inside was my own shorthand. No video, no witnesses, IA closed, drop. I'd written it as if I were describing weather. At 9:03 a.m. on day 1, I'd signed the new retainer for this prison case and put $8,000 in commissary bills in my drawer. At 9:16 a.m., according to the timestamp on the outside attorney's payment receipt included in the packet, the pooled funds transfer cleared into her trust account, which meant the inmates had lined it up before she ever sat down in my office. They'd given themselves 13 minutes to spare. They hadn't hired me because they trusted me. They'd hired me because I was useful, and because they already knew where to cut me. By the time the subpoena started landing, the warden's office had to respond. That was real pressure, the kind that forces people to create documents they can't later deny. A detective in my position doesn't get to expose anyone. I hand things to people who do. The outside attorney pushed the civil side. She also made referrals to the county prosecutor's office and the federal side, because a pattern of retaliatory deaths inside a public facility doesn't stay local if the paperwork is solid. I delivered my final report in person to the prosecutor's intake unit at a county courthouse, not a dramatic handoff. A clerk with a stamp, a receipt number, a chain of custody form. The thick folder, death correlation, Form 19C pattern, scanned letters, funeral time discrepancies, visitor log references, the digitized toilet paper codes, went across the counter.
The clerk counted pages and stapled the receipt to the front. The thin folder, case file 04112, and the inmate lawyer's note stayed in my bag.
Back at my office, I opened the safe and placed the thin folder inside, behind old insurance documents and a passport I don't use. Then I took the photocopy of my dismissal signature and ran it through my shredder in slow feeds so it wouldn't jam. I kept one thing, the inmate lawyer's handwritten note. Not for inspiration, for inventory. It was proof that somebody inside had aimed this at me personally. The outside attorney texted later that afternoon. DA accepted. Expect contact for follow-up. I didn't reply. I locked my office, turned off the lights, and stood for a moment with my hand on the doorknob, not leaving yet. The building was quiet. My phone stayed in my pocket. The receipt from the courthouse said the intake clerk stamped my thick folder at 2:41 p.m., and the thin folder sat in my safe behind case file number 04112, waiting for a day I hadn't